There's still hope for Spider-Man in the MCU, but we've got to break down everything that happened with this story and all the most recent updates. You might be surprised who's actually to blame.
It's like the news, but for nerds.
Today's shout out goes to Doctor Strange Parkour. Indeed, Sam Alexander is the younger Nova. Make sure you stay to the end of this video where we will ask another nerd card question. What's up, everybody? I'm Josh. Welcome back to the den, and indeed we've got a doozy of a story today. It's all people can talk about, man. Yesterday, the Deadline report came out saying that Spider-Man was being taken away from the MCU by Sony, and the entire internet freaked out. Here's executive producer Al Schuler's reaction right here.
Why, Sony? Why?
And the internet agrees with Al Schuler, and a lot of people had this reaction, man. Everybody was pretty much hating on Sony, being real upset about this. In fact, it was reported that Sony's stock price actually took a pretty significant dip yesterday, and that was attributed to a lot of the negativity from fans online. And we think this was so crazy for Sony that it actually prompted a response because they gave an official statement to The Hollywood Reporter. And here's what the statement says right here. They say, much of today's news about Spider-Man has mischaracterized recent discussions about Kevin Feige's involvement in the franchise, says a Sony spokesperson. We are disappointed, but respect Disney's decision not to have him continue as a lead producer of our next live-action Spider-Man film. We hope this might change in the future, but understand that the many new responsibilities that Disney has given him, including all their newly added Marvel properties, do not allow time for him to work on IP they do not own, says the statement. Kevin is terrific, and we are grateful for his help and guidance and appreciate the path he has helped put us on, which we will continue. Now that statement feels sort of like an apology. It also feels like they're really trying to clarify a lot of the misrepresentation of what is going on because, like I just said, the perception for people is Sony bad, Disney, Feige, Marvel good, and Sony's being the bad guy in this situation. Now, it's not exactly that simple, but them actually putting out a statement, by them I mean Sony, putting out an official statement like this to The Hollywood Reporter, it reeks of them actually having this plan backfire. So I think they actually leaked this stuff initially to get some pressure back on Disney because negotiations are still going on. So what exactly happened? I mean, I told you guys yesterday we're going to have to wait for a lot of the fallout, for a lot more information from insiders. So this is what we are hearing. This is our best look at what's actually going on, and it could even be more complicated than this. But apparently the big sticking point here for the contract was that Disney wanted to co-finance and take home 50% of the profits of the future Spider-Man movies. As it stands right now, the Spider-Man movies, the specific Spider-Man movies like Homecoming and Far From Home, are seen as a Sony movie, and Marvel gets only 5% of the total box office that these films do. I don't think they spend any money to co-finance the film, but they only get like a 5% chunk. Now, in the current arrangement, Marvel, of course, gets to use the Tom Holland Spider-Man character in the MCU. Feige was producing the Sony movies, which of course allowed them to really use a lot of the Marvel goodness, because that's a producer decision, and Marvel would make most of the money on comic books, merchandising, and theme parks. So that's what's official out there. That's the most recent updates, that the hang-up was about this co-financing thing. Like Disney, of course, is seeing the fact that this is a $1 billion franchise now. Even the first movie almost made $1 billion, and they're only getting 5% of that, despite them putting Kevin Feige, their most valuable asset as a producer, on these movies. And I think the Sony statement sort of mirrors this. It clarifies this. Like what they are saying in the Sony statement is that Feige is no longer going to be a producer on the Spider-Man movies, but that's Disney's decision. Essentially, that's what Disney's pulling away from the table because they're not getting their way with the co-financing and the 50% take of future movies. The bottom line is that this is business decisions messing with a fandom, messing with the things that the fans actually want. And I don't blame Kevin Feige in this situation at all. I do not think that Kevin Feige has a problem with the current arrangement, and I do not think Kevin Feige thinks it's worth walking away from that arrangement to get more money for each Spider-Man movie. But Feige has a boss, just like everybody's got a boss, and I'm pretty sure Disney is playing some real hardball negotiations with Sony. And I just gotta be honest here with you guys, this isn't gonna be a popular thing for me to say, but I do actually agree with the sentiment out there that Sony is kind of being taken advantage of with this new Disney arrangement. Like, for Disney to come over and say, hey, your biggest franchise of all time, the one thing that's sort of propping up your studio, yeah, we were helping you with that, but now we kind of want more. In fact, we want half.
Okay, 30%. That's 3 of us. 30%, that's fair.
Half.
I meant 33.
I meant half.
And a third.
Half.
35.
Half.
40.
Half.
42.
Like, unfortunately, I have to agree with people like Scott Mendelson and people like John Campea when they say that Disney's getting greedy, that this is a greedy move by Disney, and it's a bad idea for Disney to pursue the negotiations in this way. But on the flip side of that, it feels to me like Sony is being super underhanded with the way they're now trying to apply pressure back on Disney to get the negotiations to go their way. Like, first of all, it just feels like this was something that Sony leaked to Deadline. That's just what it feels like to me. And then when you combine that with the statement they later made, it just really feels like they're trying to use the media and use the fandom to leverage against Marvel. The only problem with that is the public sentiment is completely on Kevin Feige and the MCU's side. And even though it's more complicated, and as I just stated, I do think Disney has a lot to do with the problems here. It don't matter, man. The fans are with Kevin Feige, the fans are with Marvel. Sony might have actually screwed up by putting this out there publicly. As we stated, their stock price took the hit and then they made the statement. It just feels like maybe they thought they could get people to put pressure on Disney, but now it's all back on Sony. I also think it's super underhanded for them to do this as we're going into D23, like the parks specifically using Spider-Man. And I've heard there's even like a Spider-Man attraction, like a main Spider-Man ride that Marvel and Disney's gonna be putting in there. That was gonna be a big deal for them at D23, you know, announcing and talking more about this Marvel land they're creating. Like, this kind of bad PR is not something Disney would want to leak right before D23. It definitely makes me think this was Sony. Sony's doing this. And so, as I said at the top, there's still hope, right? These negotiations are still ongoing. I think Kevin Feige is going to get personally involved now because he really likes the Spider-Man character. We talked about this yesterday on the live stream. Look, Feige loves Spider-Man. Feige thinks that Spider-Man is the most important part of the Marvel Universe. And moving forward, it's just so obvious that he leveraged a lot of the future of the MCU around the Spider-Man character. And when you look at Sony, like, it really does seem like, you know, with their stock price going down and the public sentiment super against them, despite it maybe not being their fault, that you would think that they would turn around and make a deal. They would do something, appease Disney in some way, negotiate so that this thing works for both parties. But I gotta be honest, I think Sony has a history of making such boneheaded decisions, particularly with their superhero things, that they might actually be dumb enough to let a lot of things burn to the ground and go create their own subpar Spider-Man movies just out of spite for Disney, which is ridiculous. But again, I think Sony is that ridiculous of a studio. And so for my final and personal take of this situation, there is still hope. I do think they could work this out, but personally for me, I'm not hopeful of it because the fact that this even went public is super bad. Like, this should never have happened. Negotiations like this happen all the time in Hollywood. This stuff should be behind closed doors. I think Sony leaked it, and by leaking it, I think they might have screwed up not only their own perception and their own PR, but overall the deal with Spider-Man. So as it stands right now, the deal is dead. Like, the deal is dead, and we're going to have to just pick up the pieces and see where we go from here. It's too early, guys. Like, it's way too early to know what this exactly means for each franchise. We're going to have to wait and see how this works out. And as I said, hopefully it all just mends itself back together and we get Tom Holland back in the MCU. They figure out something for the future movies with Sony. Hopefully it's all good and we figure it out. But as of now, it looks really bad, and it looks like it's probably not going to happen because, again, it going public, super bad bad sign. Sony coming out making that statement yesterday, super bad sign. So we'll keep our eye on this story, of course, and I'll bring you any updates that happen. But for now, it's looking real bad, but there might be some hope still for Spider-Man as negotiations are ongoing. This is a big, crazy, complicated story. I'm sure you have some thoughts. What are you thinking? Like, what do you think about Disney's play for the 50%, split? What do you think about Sony's situation? What do you think about this whole thing going public? Just any and every thought you have about the Sony situation, hit us up in the comment section below. And now let's check the nerd card. I want to know, what is the name of the best friend of Miles Morales? He looks a lot like Ned Leeds, actually, from the Spider-Man series on the MCU and Sony's part. But yeah, the question remains, what is the name of this character that was best friends with Miles Morales? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.